Flag carriers often embody the culture, values, and more of the country that they represent. They are equally an airline as much as a company for the people. When you see your national airline on holiday, or maybe on the other side of the world, and even jump on board one of their planes, it's meant to fill you with a sense of pride. In Australia, and with flag carrier Qantas, the opposite could be said now for multiple years. It's been nothing short of a dumpster fire that grows every single month, taking new victims and exposing more. Many months ago, and around the conception of this channel, I covered the downfall of the Australian carrier. But frankly, so much has happened since then, it would be wrong of me not to revisit the topic. The spirit of Australia. Not really though anymore. What's happened lately? Where has it all gone wrong? And why do people believe that the only people that have caused the downfall of the carrier are those within the company? Make sure to subscribe to the channel with over 80% unsubscribed. Let's begin dating back to the global pandemic, when really the dark times for many, and equally our aviation industry, arrived, with carriers going bankrupt, losing billions, but most of all, the effect on employees, who lost their jobs, overarching all problems at an executive level. As the airlines scrambled to cut costs, the biggest casualty was more often than not experienced workers. And for Qantas, the significant outsourcing and removal of employees was something they engaged in. Qantas were eventually found to have illegally outsourced thousands of new ground staff workers. What happened because of this? Through no fault other than the airline in a bid to cut costs, new workers who joined the scene were left with improper training, no mentors, and generally no experienced workers to guide them, who had all left. Qantas' safety record was almost left in tatters on numerous occasions when it was identified that baggage had been loaded incorrectly and was recognised at the last moment. Additionally, with luggage going missing, being damaged, and so much more, it got so bad that executives were being told to work down on a ramp to help. As well, during the pandemic, Australians overseas, whether for personal reasons, work, or something in between due to closed borders for Australia, were sometimes unable to get back home for over a year, leading to substantial costs and stress. Qantas offered a handful of rehabilitation flights that did cost a truckload and were booked in seconds. These flights had poor advertising and much worse organisation, making them pretty impossible to book and leaving more people stranded. Pictures and videos have popped up over the years highlighting how the flag carrier abandoned Australians when times got tough, which is not a core value of being Australian, and certainly not something that the flag carrier should ignore. This only worsened when Qantas moved its customer support team overseas, as they continued to try their best to outsource, lower costs, and cut unnecessary staff that in hindsight probably were necessary. Was outsourcing the call centre a problem? Not on the surface, but factoring in that they were significantly understaffed, had improper training, and so much more, meant it was a disaster waiting to happen. And guess what? It did very well turn into an absolute disaster. Passengers, while stranded overseas or trying to leave the country, would spend 40 hours on the phone across a week-long period, being rebooked on incorrect flights, being made to pay more due to errors from the airline, tickets getting lost, and so much more. And if you don't believe me, well, guess what? Unfortunately, I went through this exact thing I'm talking about now. However, these stresses would only increase when the straw truly broke on the camel's back, following an investigation by the ACCC, the watchdog for fairness on consumers in Australia, who identified that Qantas has allegedly sold flight tickets that they knew were cancelled for days in 2022. Worse still, in some cases, passengers were not informed of this for close to 2 months after their booking, and especially after the cancellation. What does this result in? Well, hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars worth of changes. As your departure date gets closer, typically airfares will only rise. Factor in the potential adjustments of hotels, events, and so much more, and if anything, the trip or your journey for business becomes unfeasible. And while the airfares have been climbing and an airline records substantial profits, the previous CEO, now Alan Joyce, said that these will drop, but Australians remain skeptical and have responded by utilising services of up-and-coming Rex, an established regional carrier for some time, but one that during the pandemic arrived on the scene truly with 737s, hoping to be there for Australians on main routes such as Melbourne to Sydney, and now their flights go away full. Allegations, such as the ones outlined by the ACCC, pushed Alan Joyce, the now former CEO, who has really been at the forefront of all the troubles, criticism and disgust the airline has copped, to leave with immediate effect, this being months earlier than originally planned. On a few occasions, Joyce would appear apologetic, but largely deflect blame away from his board and himself onto external factors, such as weather. This is something that, when taking a look at the Australian public's reaction, was not appreciated, and the firm belief was that frustrations only grew from this point forward. Eventually, and only a few weeks ago, at the time of publishing, as mentioned, Joyce would step away. It was a landmark moment for the Australian flag carrier, and many would put the case forward is the only way the company will progress. When you factor in COVID-19 flight credits and so many more areas of the business that have left customers struggling, it really highlights the issues. What's interesting from the entire state of Qantas, if we take a look, and what has happened in the recent years, is the unsung heroes are those who are actually powering and trying their best to steady the ship. No, that's not the executives, but that's the tens of thousands of workers who remain, and in a lot of cases, have had to work the job of many, thanks to Qantas's outsourcing, reducing staff and trying to cut costs when demand returned very quickly. Those workers show up every day, most days they're exhausted, overtired, and work their heart out to try and provide the best customer experience. It, though, hasn't been continued when you look at higher-ups. As described by some analysts, those that aren't present and say sit behind a glass wall cause employees to cop the most flack. Qantas will now, though, look to enter its new era, where their new CEO confirms that the customers will be put at the forefront. However, the work that will be required is immense, and the damage sustained by a long-standing icon of Australia is endless. Alan Joyce leaves Qantas, one would argue, in a far worse place than when he arrived. Yes, the brand is in tatters, and its public perception couldn't be lower. However, with a clear out at the top, and what many have identified as the main problem, leaving, there is still a lot to look forward to. However, it will take time and a lot of relationship mending. Only time will tell if Qantas can one day be the spirit of Australia again as they brand on their aircraft. Do you believe Qantas has a chance to turn around its fortunes? Some would say, given it's been in the industry for over a century, yes, and it's gone through hard times before, and now it's going through a tough period. But with a clear out, a new direction, things should change. In the next month, I do actually want to take a look at Qantas in a more positive manner, examining their new era, what that will entail, and how the airline may look towards gathering that trust back from their customers. Thanks a lot for watching, take care and be safe. I'll see you next time for more aviation analysis.